My quality of life, Jordan, now is higher than when I could see. And the only thing that's changed is my attitude. I'm still as blind as a bat, but my goodness, now I'm a happy bat.
Yeah, and I couldn't have said it better myself. Obviously, from what I understand, you lost your sight in your 20s and begun adventuring at what, age 50. Can you describe a bit of your lifestyle in between?
Yes. So, Jordan, I was in Zimbabwe. That's just above South Africa, in Central Africa. No knowledge of support for blind people. As I lost my sight, I lost my confidence, my dignity, my independence. In my early 40s, came over to the UK. My wife is English. We've been married for over 46 years. Out of interest, 3 children, 4 grandchildren. So up until the age of 50, when I came over here, I started working for the Royal National Institute of Blind People, RNIB. And I was really encouraged, Jordan, because I met other blind people who seemed to be happy. Now, I didn't want to use a white cane or anything like that, because I thought everyone using them was brain damaged or stupid, or just, I wanted to keep my independence as long as possible. And so I didn't want to use anything. Later, fascinating, I then became an employment consultant within the RNIB, helping other people going blind. And I started using all sorts of aids and equipment. So I visited this one chap. He was about 100 miles away from my office. And he said, Miles, I know I'm going blind, but I'm going to keep my independence as long as possible. I'm not going to use a long cane or get a guide dog. When I go to the pub, yes, I know I bump into lampposts and things, but I'm still going to keep my independence. I said, hey, Paul, let me explain something to you. You are losing your independence. Me, I happen to have a guide dog then, Jordan. And I said, this dog is my passport to independence. A white stick is the same thing. You think you're keeping your independence bumping into people and lampposts. You've lost it. A white stick isn't a symbol of someone who's lost their independence. You've got your independence back again. So, yeah, for me, Jordan, I started meeting other blind people who appeared not to be embarrassed about having a white stick. When I was learning, I was so embarrassed. If someone came along and I was on the pavement, I'd hide it behind my back, and pretend I was blowing my nose or something. My blind brother, I'll tell you a bit more about him, but he came over to visit me, much more confident with his white stick. And I went to the local shop in the village where we live, only 100 yards down the road, using my white stick not very well. And I bumped into a lamppost. And my brother turned around and said, what was that? I said, I just bumped into a lamppost. He said, why aren't you using your stick properly? Serves you right. Stupid blind man, if you don't use a stick, you deserve to walk into, So he had no sympathy, but because he'd already got his independence back. So it was a slow thing for me. But step one was to recognize there were other blind people who could get dressed smartly. They could do their own cooking, cleaning. They had mobility aid. They could walk independently to work. They could use a computer. And my first revelation, Jordan, was to understand that blind people could do loads of things. They were lawyers and solicitors and computer programmers. So I thought, other blind people can do this, I can do it as well. And that was my first thing to realize. I could do what other blind people could do.
So, well, you're looking at probably about a 30-year period. I imagine it might have been a bit of a dark point, going through that into that integration into being a lot more self-sufficient. Would you have described yourself as the adventurous type?
No, not really. I was the youngest in my class at school. My brother was always better than me at everything. I was a skinny runt at school, so I knew my place in the pecking order. I was always one of the last people to be chosen at sports and things like that. So I grew up knowing my place in life was limited anyway, because I was just a skinny person, sort of almost too young to be in that class. The one thing I started doing when I was partially sighted was skydiving.
Yeah.
My girlfriend had left me for my best friend, and I was feeling terrible. My brother had done lots of skydiving. He said, Miles, take up skydiving, help you forget about your girlfriend. So I've done
Okay.
40 skydiving jumps as a partially sighted person, solo, no tandem. And I had to try and never make sure I was the first one out because I couldn't see where the DZ, the descent zone was and stuff. But yeah, but that was the only thing I'd done until 50. And yes, I went through a lot of dark times. I didn't want to learn to read Braille because I wasn't blind. I didn't want, in those days, you could get books on cassette. I didn't want those because I wasn't blind. I was struggling to read, but I didn't want to accept the fact that blindness was going to change my life. And now I've realized if you can't change your circumstances, change your attitude to your circumstances. And for me, and I think for all blind people, Jordan, who have gained their independence again, as you're losing your sight, it's like going into a cave, but there's a back exit as well to the cave. Or think about it like a tunnel. If you play Monopoly, you've got to go past Go to get your £200. Now, I didn't realize that if I wanted my independence back again, I didn't know that life as a blind person could be equally, if not more exciting and fulfilling than a sighted person. You've got to go through this tunnel, and in this tunnel, you can sit there and have a pink pity party, which is what I was doing, feeling sorry for myself. Or you can learn to use a computer. Mobility is one of the biggest things. Every person I met losing their sight, the hardest thing was giving them back their mobility independence, learning how to dress, if you're a girl, learning how to put your makeup on, blah, 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 using a computer. My brother, by the way, talk more about him, but he built a yacht by feel in Durban in South Africa, sailed it solo to Australia, totally blind, totally alone. And his computer was only a Eureka, which is a beautiful Australian computer with 6 little Braille keys on it. That's all. And my brother used that anyway. But so for me, and I say to anyone still struggling with coming to grips with blindness, you've got to go through the tunnel. You can spend the rest of your life sitting on benefit and feeling sorry for yourself in the tunnel. Or you think, okay, how can I get around by myself, learn mobility, go for training? And of course, Vision Australia, you've got all the aids and amazing podcasts, David and all these guys. Meet other people who are more independent than you, learn from them. How do you do this? Get computer skills, JAWS, whatever it is. But you got to choose whether you want to stay in that tunnel for the rest of your life. You can take years slowly going through the tunnel and trying to get some independence and quality back. But the quicker you go through, the quicker you get your quality of life. You come back into the sunshine. It's a totally different world. But who says that the quality is lower? There was an interview a few years ago, 2 people on our local BBC Radio 5 Live. Both of them were quadriplegics. They're both paralyzed from the neck down, couldn't use their arms or legs. One chap, they're both 28 years old. There was a guy and a girl. The girl was a painter. She was doing amazing paintings with a paintbrush in her teeth. The guy was on his way to Switzerland to die. You could have euthanasia. It was legal in Switzerland. And they were debating on the radio. He said, there's no quality of life left. I'm going to die. She was having the most amazing time selling her paintings. So all I'm saying is this: disability need not reduce your quality of life at all. It's a matter of attitude. Attitude is everything, and attitude is a personal choice. Can't change your circumstances, change your response to them. And that has made a huge difference in my life. And anybody with blindness, never, or losing your sight loss, never let anybody tell you that your quality of life is going to go down. It's rubbish. It's up to you. My quality of life, I've achieved more as a blind person than when I could see. And me, if a runt, a skinny guy at school had no self-confidence, if my life has been transformed and I've now spoken in 74 countries to global corporations, over 1,600 corporate events, people paying a silly blind twit who couldn't walk to the local shops to buy a loaf of bread, My life has been changed. And I tell you what, the only thing special about me, Jordan, is I'm totally ordinary. You know, if you think I'm special, talk to my wife. So if an ordinary guy like me can have my life transformed, same for every single one of you.
So Miles, you're 50 years of age. At 50 years of age, there must have been a catalyst for this new change of view. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So I briefly mentioned my brother Jeffrey. He's also totally blind. He used to sail when he could still see Apache side. That he'd taken part in yacht races from Cape Town to Rio. He decided he wanted to sail to Australia solo. So he built a yacht in his back garden, Jordan, by feel. Now, if you want a stupid hobby for a blind man, it's building a boat in the garden. You know, does he think he's Noah or something? And all his neighbors looking over the fence said, what a stupid hobby, you know. Anyway, he launches it and it doesn't sink. It's a 32-foot yacht. And everyone said, oh, bless, look, it's a blind man here. Blind man built that boat 10 minutes and it's still floating. Oh, bless. Well done, blind man, you know. What are you going to do that? He said, I'm going to sail it to Australia. And all of his sailing friends said, oh, Jeff, I'm not available. You know, I don't know when you're going, but I might have a funeral that day.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm busy. He said, no, none of you are going. I'm going to do it on my own. And they said, you got to understand, it's impossible for a blind man to cross an ocean solo. He said, no, it's not impossible, just never been done before. That changed my life. Jordan, for you and all the guys listening, tuning in, draw an imaginary circle around where you're sitting at the moment. That circle represents you, everything you've done in your life up until now, today. So when you do something new that you've never done before, the only way for that new event to become part of your circle, part of your life, your circle has to grow to make room for that new event. You never jumped out of an aeroplane. That's a big deal. Your circle grows. So here's the question. When was the last time you did something for the first time in your life? That was the last time you grew as a person. Doesn't matter how successful you are. Doesn't matter what you're doing in your circle. You might be highly successful, whatever you're doing. But if you're just doing the same thing over and over again, you're not doing anything new. You're not growing. Shame on you. Last time you did something for the first time, that's the last time you grew. So my brother then sailed solo to Australia, 51 days in the Southern Ocean, nearly died, 5 days in a forced wind gale. He had speech output technology, as mentioned earlier, very primitive Eureka Braille keyboard computer, but he had speech output. He could tell the speed of the wind, direction of the wind. He had self-furling sails, so he could sail in the cockpit in a major storm and furl the sails, etc. So he made it to Australia, and that was my huge kick up the backside, because here's my brother blind like me. I'm doing nothing because blind people can't do anything. He set an amazing world record that still stands today.
Yeah.
So I sailed to Australia, and famous photograph at Fremantle Yacht Club, 2 blind adventures supposedly, and the camera wants a picture. So we got our glasses of beer, clinking our glasses of beer. But when people look at the photograph, one glass is down, the other one's about 18 inches away up in another direction, because you're 2 silly blind idiots. But so that was the turning point. And I said to my brother, how come you're a success and I'm not? He says, because you, Miles, are focusing all the time on your blindness. What can a blind man do? What can a blind man do? He said, I'll tell you what a blind man can do. Shut up about your blindness. I said, well, what do I do then? He says, what do you want to do with your life? Start with your dreams. Don't start with your blindness. You see, I wanted to be a pilot, Jordan. And but everyone said, if you're blind, you can't fly. When I came over to the UK, there was an advert about the Hilton-Barber Foundation. They were teaching people with disabilities how to fly. There was a free course, 6-week course in America. And I phoned up this chap. He was ex-squadron leader, Douglas Huskers Roberts. Anyway, yes, old boy, what sort of disability have you got? I said, well, I'm blind. He said, oh, no, old boy, you don't understand. You know, Douglas Barber, he had no legs, marvelous, you know. Other people with one arm, prosthetic arm, yes. Blind people, no. Goodness me, blind people can't fly. So I knew blind people couldn't fly. My brother said, start with your dream. You want to be a pilot? Go back to England. And the question is not, or the statement isn't blind people can't, if you're blind, you can't fly. The question is, how the heck can you fly if you can't see? Totally different question. And then I started thinking, I didn't want to have someone else telling me how to fly and, you know, where to go. I wanted speech output, information in my ears. Other pilots get it through their eyes, all that information of their flight instruments. So I decided I want that same information, get it through my ears. So I had a little keyboard, a bit like a numpad, separate numpad. It was velcroed onto the legs of my flying suit. And I learned to fly this microlight. It's 10-foot long, 32-foot wingspan, but basically a glorified hang glider with an engine on the back. And so my brother turned my life around. Now I don't start with my blindness. I want to fly. I want to race a motor car. I want to climb a mountain. I want to pull a sledge, skydive, scuba dive, motor race. I start with the fact, how can you race a motor car if you can't see? That's very different saying you can't race a motor car because you're blind. So my brother was the turning point in my life. And the big thing I want to say is this also, Jordan. My life was transformed positively because I was meeting other blind people in the UK who were living independent, quality lives. They said lawyers, solicitors, all sorts of stuff, blind. So I knew if other blind people do it, I could do it. My brother was saying to me, Miles, don't limit your dreams to what other blind people have already done. Because for someone to jump out of an aeroplane for the first time, that's scary. You know, other people have done it, but it doesn't mean to say it's still not scary for you. I wanted to climb Mount Everest, and I was reading books, Touching the Void, Into Thin Air. I knew that, you know, I knew the route up Everest. I went to Scotland, did some winter mountaineering. I was doing grade 3 technical ice climbing, which basically is an 80-degree incline on ice with ice axes and crampons. I knew that the Hillary Step, the toughest part of Everest, is less. It's only grade 2. So in training, I was doing more than I needed. And I figured I might be blind. I had no mountaineering experience, but I thought, what the heck, I could learn. So I started realizing that I could dream of doing things that other blind people had never done. Why? Because if you jump out of an airplane for the first time, or me do something in my life for the first time, and for you listening, as long as it's safe, you're not being silly, take the risk of winning. Don't worry if no other blind person has done it. Scratch your head. Is it possible? If it's possible, it's achievable. Give it a go. Something worse than failing, and that's failing to try. You know, one day, someone said to me a few years ago, all of us have got 2 lives. And we start living, all of us have got 2 lives, and we start living the second life the day we realize we've only got 1. So don't sit back and have a pity party. You know, there's something worse than failing, and that's failing to try.
So Miles, 2 years between going and having that photo with your brother in Australia to taking off in your microlight. Do you want to explain a little bit about the planning process that you undertook for that, and whether you've mirrored it with other things as well?
Yes. So once I started planning with a microlight, I was now speaking at often 100 corporate events a year. And I was doing a lot, in this case, with Rolls-Royce senior leadership, because they've got a big setup here in Derby.
Yeah.
And I come along and I said, look, one day I'm going to fly this microlight to Australia. Had some video clips of me training and stuff. Come back the next year, tell us all about the flight. No, haven't done it. Lots of things went wrong, Jordan, with the planning, and people didn't want to help me because they thought I'd die and they'd get blamed for it or something. So the big thing I want to say, don't give up. I spent 4 years planning to fly to Australia, and I never gave up. And year after year, Rolls-Royce, can you tell us about your flight? No, I haven't done it yet. I never gave up.
Yeah.
So I want to say to you people listening or watching, you may have dreams, goals, things you started a while ago, and you've stopped. You know, things went wrong. Oh, my friend, if I could tell you of all the things that went wrong in my life, but the critical thing, it doesn't matter how many times you fall in a ditch, stand up again. So that time, yes, I was learning what other blind people could do, but I was learning to fly. loads of things, technology. No one had ever designed speech output on flight instruments because blind people don't fly. I tried for fun phoning up different airlines, see if I could be a pilot. Just a bit of a joke, phoning up Air France. Can I come and be a pilot with you? I'm like, oh, no. So I tried phoning Lufthansa. No, tried phoning British Airways. Oh, no, old man. So just a bit of a joke. But don't give up when things go wrong. It is common in life for the wheels to fall off. But when they do, put the wheel back on, get back on again. And, when later on, I've done 4 desert ultra marathons, running through different deserts and things, often about 150 miles or so. My friend and I, my sighted guide, we took part quite soon, long before I'd flown to Australia. It's a thing through the Sahara Desert, Marathon des Sables, 150 miles, called the toughest foot race on earth. And my sighted guide and I, we never do enough training. So don't think, my friends, that I'm some super athlete. No way. So the first thing, if you want to do something, 5-kilometer park run, if you do these park runs in Australia, 10 kilometers, half a marathon. For example, when I'm running a marathon, we never train enough. So the first half of the marathon is training. You see, I can't run a marathon, no, especially with no training. So in our heads, we think the first half, that's just training. Then we've only got half a marathon. One of the last marathons was New York. I was 65 then. And 2 weeks before the race, phone call, there's been a cancellation. There's a place, you want to do it? I'd done no training, Jordan. I had a damaged knee. My knee I was almost limping on it, but I had a personal trainer for a while, just once a week. I said to him, hey, come to New York. So we went across there. We did one run in advance. Now, I had a bad knee, no training. So is that a good reason to do a marathon? No, but what the heck? Take the risk of winning, give it a go. So we did it very slow, took me 6.5 hours. Now, rubbish time, but hey, I've done the New York Marathon, have you done the New York Marathon? So I often say to these people at conferences, or to all of you, visually impaired people, whatever, don't start thinking, I've got to train a lot if I'm going to do this. No, number one, sign up. Once you sign up and you start telling people you're committed, once you open your mouth and you start telling your mates you're going to do this or that, now you can't back down. Otherwise, you said you're going to do it. So that's how we do it. I've never trained enough for anything, but we've had a lot of fun. I've never won any race, but I've done, as I said, 4 desert ultras and all sorts of stuff. Had a lot of fun. So you want to do something you've never done before, make a commitment. So my recipe for success in life is dream, 4 steps: dream, decide, plan, persevere. Start with a dream. Okay. But if you only have a dream and you don't do anything about it, it's like everyone who's had a shower has probably had a good dream, had a good idea in the shower. But unless you get out, tell yourself down, do something about it, it stays a dream. Have a dream, make a decision. Okay. Sign up for that thing. You people, I want to tell you something. I've spoken at conferences where I was in Amsterdam. There were 5 ladies out, 5 Dutch girls chatting away, and they'd seen a video of me doing this toughest foot race in the world, blah, blah, blah. And I said, hey, and one of the girls said, do you think we can do that? I said, hey, it's harder than you think, but it's also easier than you think. All 5 of those girls made a decision at that dinner after I'd spoken to do that so-called toughest foot race, and they all did it, you see? So anyway, all I'm saying is make a decision and then plan and then persevere. Plan your work your plan, persevere. Oh, I've had so many things go wrong with lots of races. But Daniel, I had, is it plantar fasciitis, that thing where your instep, the arch of your foot gets very tender and stressed. So I think the last race I did was a marathon in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, what used to be Saigon City, now Ho Chi Minh. I'd spoken at a bank conference 6 months earlier, another part of Vietnam. And then the bank manager said, hey, we're sponsoring this race in Ho Chi Minh, will you come and run? It was hard for me to say no, because here I'm making out a big deal in this blind adventure. So I had to say yes, but my foot was in a mess. So when I did it, it was again very poor, but I couldn't back out. They had big posters of me 10, 15 foot tall all around the city and stuff.
Yeah.
But I did it. very poor time. And at the end, I was literally in tears, the pain. I was hopping on one foot, holding onto the shoulder of my friend, and
Yeah.
had me up on stage with a glass of champagne. But I looked a real wuss because I had to sit on a stool. But we did it, you see. So don't be afraid of failing. There's something worse than failing, and that's failing to try. Doesn't matter how many times you fail, get up again, and you'd be amazed what you can achieve.
So with these years of telling people you're going to do it, hadn't done the race or hadn't done the flight to Australia,
Yeah.
you get to the last night before you're due to take off. Tell us a little bit about that. Was there fear? Was there excitement? Was there a combination of both? What are we talking here?
Jordan, let me tell you something quite incredible. My sighted co-pilot, we had 4 years of planning this. The night before we were due to leave on a Monday morning from just outside London, famous ex-fighter station during World War II, the night before we left, he backs out. He has a panic attack. The night before, we've been sponsored by the Standard Chartered Bank. Loads of money and planning, years went into it. He packs out and he has a panic attack. He says, I'm not coming. He runs to the toilet. He says, I'm not coming. And I said, why? He said, we're going to die. I said, why? He said, you're blind. I said, you stupid idiot. You've seen me with a white stick the last 4 years. Why didn't you say no 4 years ago when we started planning this? I don't know. True story. 10 o'clock at night, I'm on my phone. We're due to leave 9 o'clock the next morning. TV, press, everyone's there. Big deal. A blind man going to fly more than halfway around the world. In an hour between 10 and 11, I found 2 microlight pilots willing to fly with me. And the chap on the video clips is the chap saying, you know, he said, I had a phone call, 11 o'clock at night. Would you like to fly to Australia in a microlight, leaving tomorrow with a blind man? And he said, yes, you know. So we had we were delayed for 2 days because of changing passports and getting, anyway, loads of stuff. But you say, what was I like? Phew. I was, so, I mean, totally true. So anyway, we went and we had several storms on the way, nearly died, and massive storms, but we made it. 55 days took me getting to Sydney, finding. When I got to Sydney, flew into City Airport, and I remember unzipping my flying suit. And as I took it off, I suddenly thought, wow, I've done it. You know, I've arrived. And I then spoke at a luncheon sponsored by the Standard Chartered Bank. We're raising loads of money for blind children around the world through Sight Savers, through the flight. And in the introduction, the chap said, and this is Miles Hilton-Barber, who's just flown from London to Sydney. And I suddenly thought, whoa, for years, I was listening to this introduction, who is going to fly. And all of a sudden I thought, you've done it. And I was so surprised. And when I look at the different things that I've done and the different world records I've set, I am so surprised to think, did I really do that? And I tell you, none of them, Jordan, were as hard as you think. A lot of people worry, you know, nothing in life is usually as hard as you think. How many times have any of you worried yourself sick about something coming up, where's something got to do, exam, whatever? When that experience has taken place, I've always found it's less difficult. It was easier than I thought. So I want to say to you, nothing in life is as hard as you think it is. And, you know, I'm such an ordinary person, you know. As I said, the only thing special about me is that I'm not. So if an idiot like me can do these things, any one of us can do so much more than we think. And I'll tell you, you do something you've never done before, a park run, 5K, 10K, half a marathon. Yes, it's tough at the time, but you look back and think, wow, that was great. It's never as hard as you think. So take the risk of winning, sign up. You know, Jordan, one of the greatest things you can do is email Dak sometime and say, hey, some of these guys listen to you, they've signed up. In France, there's now over 180 vision impaired or blind people flying microlights, all because this silly trip flew all the way to Australia. And all of a sudden now, other blind people think, oh, here's something else. We didn't know we could fly, but we must be able to because that chap did it and he's blind. So, go for it.
Yeah, look, I want to ask a little bit more about this. So I want to ask, I've spoken to a couple of adventurers, and they've spoken in the past about when you sort of settle into doing what you're doing, the adrenaline's worn off. They call it the honeymoon period ending. Was it sort of the same for you? I mean, as you said, 55 days in a hang glider with a lawnmower engine on the back. At what point did did the adrenaline sort of wear off and you sort of started to settle into what you were doing?
Yeah. Jordan, that flight was a bit of an exception because there was a lot of excitement on the way. And
yeah,
I mean,
maybe you never settled in. That's probably maybe it was all adrenaline.
But let me say, one of the things I was wanting to do is manhaul a sledge 1,200 kilometers to the South Pole. As it turned out, as you said, I did 20 kilometers because I ended up with frostbite. But anyway, when we started, no blind person had ever attempted to manhaul a sledge anywhere. And so again, I'm way out of my comfort zone, you know?
Yeah.
A famous quote is this: only those willing to risk going too far will discover how far it is possible to go. So what a sad thing to look back on our life and think, you know, for me, my greatest regrets, Jordan, at the end of my life will not be the things that I've attempted and failed, but the things that I haven't attempted, you see?
Yeah.
So anyway, Antarctica, it took me 2 or 3 days pulling a sledge to realize you are a stupid idiot. This is very, very difficult. I'd never skied on snow before. I had to learn how to ski, you know, I'd never used skis. And so you're manhauling a sledge, you're rising up something like 9,000 feet, climbing up into the Antarctic plateau. Day 3, I'm thinking, you stupid idiot. Now, some of you may have heard of Sir Ranulph Fiennes, who's quite a famous British adventurer. He's gone right the way across Antarctica with a chap called Dr. Mike Stroud. Dr. Mike Stroud was with me. I did a thing through the Qatar Desert, a world record, crossing it non-stop, blah, blah, blah. Qatar, of course, is where they had the recent World Cup. But Mike was saying to me, after 3 or 4 days, he was realizing he was in the wrong place. And it was so encouraging for me to realize, actually, a lot of us, most things, anytime I've done it, even just a marathon, Jordan, it takes maybe half a mile to think, Barber, you stupid idiot. Why did you decide to do this, you know?
Yeah.
And so, again, yes, it's common for me at the time to think, oh, well, you know, so it feels more difficult. But again, we've had a lot of fun. And again, going back to running, always think about something bigger. So when I was heading for the South Pole, I think it was day 3 or 4, I was exhausted. There were 3 other guys with me. They were using their ski poles and they were skiing past all this, what we call sastrugi, these ice ridges all over the place. And for me, of course, I couldn't see them. I was listening to the sound of my sighted guide's sledge, and I was listening to whatever. But I was using my ski poles like a white stick, trying to feel where the sastrugi is. And so I was using only my leg muscles, pulling this sledge that weighed several times my body weight. So I'm exhausted. Day 3, 9 in the morning, I'm almost vomiting. I'm so exhausted. And so the next night I said to my friend, I was in this little tent, 2 of us in the tent. We had a big map, 6 foot, about 6 foot wide, the route to the South Pole over all the crevasses and this and that.
Yeah.
So John, we've been going 3 days, put my finger, index finger, where we started, a place called Hercules Inlet on the actual coast of Antarctica. Now with my other hand, put my finger where we are now, just to encourage me. John started laughing. I said, why are you laughing? He says, you silly blind man, your little fat finger still covers both points. And that was 6 foot in width. So I was so discouraged and I thought, I can't do it. So heading off the rest of the day, I thought, how the heck can I do it? Mentally, it was too big. Then I thought, Miles, you're only going halfway. You're only going to the South Pole. So you're only doing half the distance that Ranulph Fiennes. Ranulph Fiennes and Mike Stroud went right the way across, over 1,400 miles. Longest unsupported journey in world history for a human. Yeah. So I thought, oh, I'm only going to the pole. So I'm just doing the Coca-Cola route. Then I thought, we're being resupplied with extra food halfway. So not only was I only doing the Coca-Cola route, but I was a wimp because we were being supplied halfway. So all of a sudden I thought, when I reached the South Pole, big deal, first blind man to manhole the pole, I won't tell them I was a wimp and I only did the Coca-Cola route. But in my head, that made it seem so much easier. The distance to the pole was the same, but I never worried again about the distance because I knew I was a wimp doing the Coca-Cola route. I was kind of cheating. So whenever anything looks too big for you, Jordan, or anyone listening, think about something 2 or 3 times bigger and then think, actually, it's okay. So that's why doing a standard marathon, we always think, okay, I'm going to do half a marathon. That's all I can do. One of the funny marathons I did was through France, through the vineyards. It's called the Medoc Marathon. Standard marathon, but you run through all these famous vineyards in the region outside Bordeaux, and they give you 20 glasses of wine along the way during the marathon. You all go in carnival costume. We went dressed up as Morris dancers with little silly straw hats and bells around our knees and funny little, anyway, ribbons, all very pathetic and wimpy. And I'd done it's called the Great North Run the week before. So on the Sunday, we'd done the Great North Run. That's only half a marathon, but you get, I don't know how many, 60, 70,000 runners. It's the biggest single race in the world, but only half a marathon. But I've done no training. I've done it 3 or 4 times, but no training. At the end, I was in a mess. And the unfortunate thing is that the next week, 6 days later, I had to do this full marathon through the vineyards. And I said to John, my friend, on the way of the flight, I said, look, I was so messed up doing a half a marathon 6 days ago. I don't think I can do it. And he said, well, you can do a half marathon. And I said, yeah. I said, all right, same thing. Just run. First half is training and the next half. And so I did it. I didn't want to get too dehydrated with the wine. So I gave most of my wine to John. John had 38 glasses of wine during this marathon. I had 2. So it went even longer because we didn't run very straight. But a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And again, I only managed it because I convinced I could do half a marathon. I couldn't do a marathon. First half training. And the second half, I said to John, I can't run anymore. Again, same trouble with my foot. But I said, look, let's run 100 yards, walk 100 yards, run 100. So that's what we did. And the funny thing is that the second half of the marathon was quicker than the first half because now, that's right, I'd done the first half. That was my half marathon. Second half, I said, I can't do it. All we're doing is walking back to the finish line. But I was running, walking, and we did it second half quicker. Again, it's mental attitude. 80% of all of the events I've taken part in, 80%, certainly with races, running, it's attitude. 20% is training.
Okay. Well, we're at we're just over halfway in the webinar, so I'm just doing a quick reminder for everyone to send their questions in. You're using the Alt H keystroke to type in, to bring up the chat function box on your Zoom, so you can send questions through. As I said, would love to get your questions through. Miles is a very fascinating man, so I'm not surprised you're all listening along and intently. But if you do have any questions, we are getting to the later stages of the webinar, and we want to give him the time to obviously answer them. So feel free to send through those questions. I'd love to hear them. So I wanted to sort of move on. So you've obviously achieved a many number of amazing feats, but my question is, looking back at yourself as a 20-year-old man going through this journey and knowing where it's going to take you, what advice would you give yourself if you had the opportunity to do so now?
Mm-hmm. The biggest thing I needed to learn, Jordan, was that blindness was not the end of my quality of life. It was just it's different, but still the potential is just the same to be as fulfilled. The sad thing for me is I had never met another blind person. When I was told I was going blind, there was no support, nothing, just walked out of the optician and that was it, the ophthalmologist. And I had nothing to base it on. And so, yeah, I wish that I had had other people who were totally blind, living independent, happy, confident lives. for me, what a revelation, visiting a blind person's home. They live on their own, and a sighted person going on wouldn't know that they were blind. The house is all neat and dusted, and they do all their own cooking and cleaning. And as I mentioned to you, Jordan, before we started, and some of you who heard the podcast a while ago, my wife was diagnosed with bone marrow cancer a year ago. So she's terminally ill, doing relatively well. She's on 12 months of treatment, but now, as a blind person,
From Jordan Ashley to everyone, hi Peter, did you have a question?
I'm doing all the cooking and cleaning and everything in the house, and quite encouraging when people come and visit and they say, they're quite impressed that the house is looking okay despite a blind man being let loose trying to sort it all out. So yes, what would I say to myself? I wish I'd had other mature blind people to say, hey, it's not the end of the world, it's just a different life that you're entering into. Go for it. Just go flat out, learn everything as fast as you can. You'll be amazed what a quality of life you've got ahead of you.
So I'm going to bring up somebody I know that you admire, Eric Weinmeier. He once said when he arrived back at base camp after climbing Everest, that one of his crew said to him, "Don't let this achievement be your greatest achievement and define you." How would you define yourself, and have these achievements brought your life fulfillment?
First of all, let me just say, Eric's just an amazing guy, and I listened to a couple of podcasts by him. Great respect for him. It was the year 2000 that I was hoping to climb Everest, I think in 2001. I was in the Himalayas and I had some sort of altitude problem, had to be flown back in a helicopter. They thought I'd had a stroke or altitude sickness. And it was, I think, the following year that I got an email saying that Eric, I didn't know about Eric at that time. And the difference is Eric had loads of experience. I didn't, but I was still convinced that a person with minimal experience, I mean, I'd climbed Kilimanjaro and Mont Blanc and stuff. But anyway, when I heard that Eric had summited, my tummy flipped over. I was so upset at one level, Jordan, because it reminded me the first time that my girlfriend left me for my best friend, and I had that sick feeling in my tummy. Although I was so proud that a blind person had summited on Everest, another part of me saying it could have been you, Anyway, so Eric was told, don't let this be your defining thing. Yes, I guess what I'm most proud of, I think, is helping people, Jordan, not necessarily people with any sort of a disability, but so many, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people I've spoken to some of the conferences I've spoken at, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 people. So many people came to me after and said, Miles, you've opened my eyes to realize I can do more than I think I could. Initially, I thought my message was to other people with disabilities or blindness, Jordan. But as I traveled the world and spoke about these basic life principles I've been hinting on just now, all of us, you included, Jordan, your busy life as a father and as a husband, there's always more on the go, and it's just finding that balance. So my defining moment, I think, is the joy
Webinar Vision Australia has joined the meeting.
I've helped a lot of people, not necessarily blind with disabilities, but people across the world who were burning up the best years of their life, not even happy with the work they're doing, but just working super hard, executives, because they're trying to get a pension or a fancy car. And I hope that, I've helped other people realize that life is all about people and relationships and taking the risk of winning. My slogan on the little business cards I have is, the only limits in your life are those you accept yourself. And the picture on my business card is me at the bottom of the Red Sea. A friend of mine, he's paralyzed from the chest down in his wheelchair, and it was just a silly photograph, but we're at the bottom of the Red Sea and I'm pushing him along the sandy bit of the Red Sea bottom. in his wheelchair, using my white stick to find the way. So I don't think any single event or activity has defined me. Some people think some things I've done are more than other. My greatest achievement, I think, is diving on a wreck 100 foot down the Red Sea. I'm very, very claustrophobic. And I got my buddy, my scuba buddy, to take me inside the wreck, into the wheelhouse of this wreck.
Yeah.
And I was panicking. I could feel with the echo of the bubbles as I was breathing, I could sense the smallness of the space I was. And part of me was just, I was about to have a sheer horrific panic attack. But I decided I wanted to overcome it. And I spent about 10 minutes just slowing my breathing down, saying, just calm down. You can breathe, get your heart rate down, get your breathing down. And to me, Jordan, of everything I've done, that for me was the greatest achievement of my life, overcoming my sheer panic. And I'm also afraid of height, which is a bit funny with some of the things, but yeah, so that was my greatest achievement. And I'm just trying to say to people, nothing is as hard as you think it is. It's not as difficult. Doesn't matter who you are, what your limitations are. Get outside your circle, grow your circle, and you'll be amazed. It's always easier than you think it would be. And you'll look back and think, why the heck did I wait so long before I stepped outside my circle?
So next question is going to be, Jeffrey obviously proved to be your catalyst. Your, as you say, your kick up the backside that you needed. How does the weight of him how does the weight of him inspiring you translated to him? Is it something that he's quite proud of, or is it something that he shrugs off and pretends has never been said? Should I even bring this up? I know what brothers are like.
Well, I mean, yes, people say, is there the sort of rivalry? Let me just say that my brother hasn't just sailed to Australia. He's done a lot more desert ultra marathons than me. He's done loads of marathons. In South Africa, there's a double marathon called the Comrades Marathon, which is 52 miles, and you've got to do it in under 11 hours. He's done that 10 times. He took part in a tandem bike race outside Cape Town on the sort of Cape Peninsula. It's called, I think, the Two Oceans bike ride. Rotary sponsors it. And it's about 80 miles, and you cycle from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean across this peninsula. And I was telling some people, my blind brother did that on his tandem. And they said, oh, yeah, not so, we've done it. We know of other blind people. I said, oh, the only difference is my brother rode his tandem from Durban all the way to Cape Town, 600 miles, before he took part. And he actually arrived the day before in the afternoon. And he said, I'm going to rest the rest of this afternoon because I got this race the next morning. So, slightly different. So he's done loads of stuff. I think, Jordan, yes, I think he's proud of me. I think maybe I've had more opportunity in Britain getting sponsorship, and, he's in South Africa, very difficult. After apartheid, there's not as many opportunities maybe for blind people. So I don't think I've done anything to compare with him alone down in the roaring 40s with waves higher than his 35-foot mast, 3 days in a force 10 gale blowing him towards Antarctica, didn't sleep for 4 or 5 days, his boat half wrecked. Incredible guts. So, yeah, what do I think? I think he's proud of me, and I'm certainly very proud. Every conference I've been speaking at, I always start with his amazing navigating solo to Australia. So, yeah, I think we've got mutual respect. And I tell people, you're going to throw your hat over the wall. True story, I may have mentioned it in the podcast a while ago. 2 little schoolboys between World War I, World War II, private school. They were junior school, and they bunked out of prep in the afternoon. 2 o'clock, the master went off, said, right, stay here till 3:30, do your prep. They were in their full school uniform, boater hats, and they went to steal some apples. There was an orchard in the farm nearby. And once they got to the orchard, there was a big 8 or 10-foot brick wall, and they couldn't find the way in. And the one kid said to his friend, oh, we better go back now before we're caught. And the other friend said, no, wait a minute. He took off his straw boater hat, threw it as far as he could over the wall. And his friend said, you idiot, if you go back without your hat, you're going to get ducks, you're going to get caned. He said, yes, I know. He said, why did you do it? He says, because now we've got to go and find that hat. And when we do, we can get the apples at the same time. And they found a way and got the hat, filled them up apples, and they went back. So my question to you, Jordan, as well as everyone else, have you thrown your hat over the wall? Get out there, get out of your comfort zone, you don't know whether it's going to work or not. Give it a go, baby. Give it a go. You've only got one life. Get out there and push the limits, baby. And it's a lot of fun along the way.
Well, that's a perfect way to finish this webinar. Thank you, Miles, so much for being such a compelling speaker, for giving us all of your life experience and your time. And I know, as I said, I know it's late over in the UK as well. So thank you for being a bit of a night owl for us as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again. I thought we might try something a little bit different just to end on this one, because I often get asked the question, how does a blind man land a microlight? So I was going to ask you if you can take us through your landing ritual for a microlight.
Yes, and let me say that is the hardest, yes, technically the hardest thing to do. So I have in my headphones, if I know the if I know the runways, it might be 210 degrees, whatever is if I know in advance where it is, if I put a waypoint in advance at the start of the runway. So let's say it's 210 degrees is if I'm on finals coming in, I've got my compass and my track. My track gives me the dotted line over the ground that I'm trying to go. The compass is giving me the actual where my microlight is pointing at the time. So let's say there's a 5 knot or 10 knot crosswind. So I'm coming in on finals. I've got my altitude being spoken all the time. In this case, it's only the barometric ones, not the modern ones, which have a beam off the ground. But so every 15 feet, it giving me the millibars, and I've got it set to the right pressure for there. As I'm coming in, I've got my track is saying 210, 210, 210. So I know the body of the microlight is heading straight towards the runway. My altimeter is telling me 450 feet, 432, 200 feet, every 15 feet, it's dropping down. So giving me an idea. I've also got my distance to destination, another bit of information. So it might be saying 0.3 of a mile, 0.2 of a mile, but my compass is saying 195. So I know that to keep the track, that the body of the microlight is still heading towards the start of the runway, I'm actually pointing, 195, quite a lot. The nose is pointing to the left or to port so that I'm staying on track. So it's a lot of information. So as my altitude is diminishing, I know in theory, when it goes 0.1 of a mile and then goes down to 100 meters, 50 meters, I'm trying to reach that waypoint at the start of the runway, with my track telling me and my distance and stuff. If you're sighted, well, of course, modern airliners, they can almost land themselves, but if you're sighted doing it yourself, you're coming around the one good. So my co-pilot has got his hands on the wing as well. It's a big bar that I'm holding to. So of course, he's my backup if anything goes really wrong or whatever. But as I land, I make sure that the two back wheels of the microlight hit the tarmac, the runway first. I leave my nose pointing more into the wind. And as soon as the two wheels hit the ground with the direction that I'm traveling, it will automatically knock my nose down so that the two back wheels are then going in the direction of travel. Push the nose down. Normally you can land at about 55, 60 miles an hour, often your stall speed in a microlight is relatively low, 45, 50, but I'll land at probably 70, 75, 70 mile an hour so that I've got more lift under the wing, which can compensate if there's buildings nearby and all of a sudden part of the wind to the left drops and I lose some of my lift.
Vision Australia.
Blindness,
Low vision.
Opportunity.
Vision Australia logo. 3 navy blue ovals linked together diagonally within a bright yellow rectangle.